All right. Looks like we've got everybody here. So we're just going to jump right into it. As I mentioned, thank you again for coming and listening to us, whether it is later at night or very early in the morning where you are. It is an unconventional time for spaces, but we're going to dive right into it anyway. My name is Grarg, and welcome to the How to Build a DAO 101 series. This is a series hosted by Connext. It's structured as kind of a bit of a round table. This is, I think, our fourth, maybe fifth in this series. I don't know. I'm bad at math. But I'd like to let all our guests know that you can feel free to explore, deep dive into various suggested topics, reference tweets, the posted articles and tweets up at the top, and of course, ask questions between one another. I'll just be here to kind of, move things along. So I'm just going to take a brief moment here to introduce all of our guests today. So I will start with, we have Daniel Goldman, who has actually sat in one of these with me before. Lovely to see you again.
Hello. Thank you for having me.
Go ahead and introduce yourself.
Sure. You mean a more general introduction? Yes. Well, hello. My name is Daniel Goldman. So I work at Offchain Labs. We are the initial builders of Arbitrum and now work as service providers and contributors to the Arbitrum protocol. I think I said all the right things there. I'm an engineer on the blockchain engineering team and also do sort of technical communication, research, content creation, things like that. And as of lately, I've been focused on some of the engineering work that has to do with the DAO and the governance system. How's that?
Perfect. Next up, we have Pirate, who's the founder at BendDAO.
Yo, Mike, thank you for having me here. I'm co-founder of BendDAO. Yeah. Yeah, I'm a programmer. Start crypto at from 2013. Joined crypto full time in 2017. I started BendDAO 2 years ago. Yeah, we are building I think most fun in DAO, most crypto native. I think maybe in MT5.
Awesome. And of course, last but certainly not least, we have Alex, who's our head of product at Connext.
Yep. Hey everyone, I'm Alex. I'm the head of product. I work at Connext. We're a cross-chain development platform. I've spent about 10 years in product working in finance companies and some Web2 companies, and I've been at Connext for about 1.5 years. So yeah, thanks for having me.
Always wonderful to have any of you guys on. So today's topic on how to build a DAO 101, we're going to be talking about product. So, right in your specific wheelhouse. So we're going to start off, just talk a little bit about vision, roadmap. So why do you guys build? What really inspires you? And what do you think needs to be built in this current market?
Yeah, who is?
I'll let you go first, Pirate.
Yeah, I'm asking who is going first. You can go first. It's okay, Alex. Sorry.
Okay. Yeah, what inspires me? So I guess I've worked in different parts of software in general. So what inspires me is really just kind of the vision of Web3 in general. I think I've seen a lot of kind of issues over the years, either things being inefficient, but also just I think power dynamics within the space and Web2 being kind of flipped. So it kind of the core thesis of Web3 is what really drives me day to day. I think this is just better infrastructure. I think it has a lot of room to grow and improve the world for the better. And I think we're just super, super early still. So that's just an opportunity and exciting. So for what we build, Connext, what inspires me here is, we vision ourselves building the fabric of a new internet. And so we think really long term about that a lot.
Yeah, I can go ahead. And in terms of the stuff that sort of most interests me about seeing the Arbitrum ecosystem move forward is, I've been sort of in the layer two space for a while, initially kind of as doing independent research and things like that. And I still sort of think of layer twos as fundamentally extensions of their base layer, in this case of Ethereum, and as almost a type of infrastructure. Even though, of course, now layer twos are a lot more. There's their whole communities, their ecosystem of dApps, and they sort of have their own ethos, as I think we'll talk about. But I think at its core, it's still infrastructure, and it's still necessary infrastructure for decentralization. So I think some of the stuff that we're sort of at Offchain Labs trying to put forward for the DAO to hopefully accept has to do with moving it along the path towards really and truly decentralizing. The layer two space has like really blossomed in the past 2 years, but one thing that we're seeing is as things, as it evolves, it's not it evolves in sort of these small steps. We get little bits and pieces, and we get some of the architecture, and things are kind of decentralizing, but only progressively. And we want to make sure. I would like to see Arbitrum really continue to lead the way there. So whether that's the various potential points of centralization in the governance system itself, various parts of the protocol, like validation and things like that are still under some sort of have some degree of permissioning or things like that. We want to make sure we can kind of get to the next stage. So that's the stuff that most interests me and that I focus on. I would also say one thing that's increasingly become clear to me is like building this stuff is one thing, but communicating it to people is a whole other challenge. So I think technical communication is something I'm very interested in, and making sure that developers, users, infrastructure providers, everyone in between really understands the stuff and understands the trade-offs. So that's kind of the stuff I do.
Yeah, like my inspiration of growing BendDAO is like when I go from DeFi Summer from ERC20 go to MT, and I found out there's no peer-to-peer lending protocol for MTs. So actually, like I think like maybe we need Aave for MTs. So that's why I started BendDAO after like many years investing in crypto. And sometimes like I want to build something cool. Like I think peer-to-peer lending protocol for MT is cool. So actually we decided to make it DAO, and because like I'm not a co-founder, we were friends, but we have different teams, but many of us don't know each other, but we are from different place in the global. So actually DAO is the best way we can build it. We write our like token on chain smart contract, and like we run without a company, without entity, and like we make like fair launch for tokens, and like every token issues transparency, and our like DAO income and revenue sharing is like all full transparent on chain. So actually like we try to build like something crypto native and transparency first for the like whole project, and that's all I think.
Perfect. So, in an open source world, then, how do you create a defensible competitive advantage for your product? Because we are here to talk about the product itself and what you guys are putting out there.
Yeah, it's interesting. I think this is kind of a trap sometimes if you think of it like a traditional startup. So in many ways, you just can't. Meaning, we're building open in the public. We're building an open source protocol. So anyone could come in at any point and fork your code. They could try to incentivize users to go somewhere else. So I think that that's actually kind of, you could spend too much trying to think about how to defend against that, which is kind of the wrong approach. To me, there's like maybe three main things that will actually give a competitive advantage. One is the community. So if you build a really strong community where people are active and it's healthy and positive, that can give you an advantage. Another might be the brand. So if you've built a lot of like legitimacy or brand recognition. And then the other one, at least for like a platform, is just how widely integrated you are. So it's kind of how embedded you are in the ecosystem. So if you're able to create something that is kind of a core primitive that people really like, over time, it has a kind of network effect. But I think overall, the focus is more on building together and kind of fostering that community rather than trying to take market share away from competitors like a traditional startup might in Web 2. Also, I should say, Connext, we haven't launched our DAO, so I'm actually I'm new to I haven't built a DAO. I'm speaking from kind of how I view it, but I'm very interested to learn from some of the other people on the call as well.
So I guess you kind of touched on it then. You're talking about, building open source and how it's just a completely different environment than you would be building under another arenas. But so when we're talking about that, the transparency of building in an open source world, building a DAO that's fundamentally visible to everybody else, and we know there has been some obfuscation in the past with other groups here and there. One of the notes I actually have on here is about surprise features, and I'm not entirely sure what that touches on, but I'd like to hear about them. But I'd also like to hear about what challenges those who have been building a DAO here have faced with their transparency within the DAO.
Yeah, I can say something about challenge. Like in BendDAO, we have dev team and the community. Right? Like dev team is going to ship product fit to market, and community we're going to decide what MT you're going to be listed in BendDAO. You can borrow money and how much money you can borrow, and some parameters for a whole protocol. And I think the best challenge for the most challenging things is sometimes an organization like BendDAO had to deal something with marketing or centralized listing, and some of the corporation they don't actually support full transparency. If you're going to list a centralized exchange, say this exchange want how many market fee or how many marketing liquid market maker fee. And I think if you're going to make a DAO a proposal, say, hey, we would like listing one centralized exchange, and the exchange needs how much money, I think it's not most likely not acceptable for those centralized exchange. And for some marketing fee, I think it will be hard because some people don't want to their marketing money or fee will be full transparency. So actually, we would like to make a full transparency DAO, but sometimes we would do some cooperation with some other marketing identity. Sometimes they don't like the full transparency. So actually, we need do some more things, do more about communication with the community and get some budget from the DAO treasury, and team going to deal with that. So I think that's the most challenging part. Anything else, I think for BendDAO is quite okay. Our work is on DWork and the full transparency, and our code is open source, and people can go to our Discord to report some UI and UE feedback, and people are going to vote for whole protocol, and they share the value distributed to them by Bend token. So actually, yeah, that's my opinion. Yeah.
Yeah, I can talk a bit about sort of going back to the question in terms of maintaining open, transparency in an open system while it's at the same time preserving some sort of competitive advantage. The approach that kind of the Arbitrum ecosystem has taken, which I think is very interesting, and as far as I know, kind of unique. So it'll be exciting to see how it plays out and how well it plays out. But I mean, in short, the DAO itself really does have, on the protocol level, really a large amount of power over not just the protocol itself, but also even the sort of infrastructure on top of it. So, for example, I mean, in terms of the software and the licensing, the basically the Arbitrum ecosystem, which now is, there's two chains. There's Arbitrum One and Arbitrum Nova. These two kind of layer two chains, if we use the term a bit loosely. These to sort of build anything on top of these is fully permissionless and sort of requires no, the license is, is entirely open. So this means anyone who wants to build a DApp on top of a layer two can do so, and also anyone who wants to launch an Arbitrum chain, sort of as like a layer three on top of one of these layer twos, can do so. And we're going to be sort of putting out more information and more tooling about that to make that as easy as possible. The software is of course all open and public source. They can fork it, they can modify it. We recommend people be careful when they do so, but they don't need any sort of permission. When it comes to launching layer twos, so there is a BSL license, but essentially that license belongs to the DAO itself, which is to say the permissioning of who else can, create their own Arbitrum layer two or layer twos using the Arbitrum stack, itself belongs to the DAO, not any other one party. So I think that, there should be an interesting balance of, again, keeping the technology within the ecosystem, maintaining some advantage there, while at the same time allowing for this full, open permissionless innovation. And at the same time, there not being any one entity or company that can really gatekeep. And that's just sort of like been the philosophy for designing the governance system is put the DAO in charge. So there's a DAO treasury, the DAO themselves can vote to give out grants. There is an Arbitrum Foundation, sort of echoing what was said before, where there's just some sort of administrative things that need to be done, and you can't always be fully transparent about every little thing. But the DAO itself actually has power over the foundation. They can even like fire and replace its members. So it's kind of a radical experiment, and we'll see how it goes. But I think it certainly is a system in which the DAO sort of at the bottom level is in control. I think in terms of some of the hiccups that were had, I don't think the initial launch of the DAO, which was now I guess like 2.5 months ago ish. I don't think it's a state secret that there was a bit of drama early on, and a lot of that had to do with kind of this transition of sort of what, it was basically a miscommunication about what things are sort of already in place versus what are the things that were giving the DAO the ability to vote on for this kind of like initial release. So, there were definitely some lessons learned there. But ultimately what I think came out of that is, the foundation and the various parties kind of negotiated these things in public with the DAO itself, and the sort of like new codification of the Constitution and the initial distribution should be submitted soon as a proposal. And so that's all kind of governance in action. So right away we saw, it can get a bit tough, it can get a bit messy, but like I said, with the DAO ultimately in control, we're seeing what that looks like, and we saw it play out. So I think it's been interesting.
Perfectly fair. And it's funny that you mentioned that too, because it strikes me that the last time I spoke to you was prior to all of those goings on. So I'm glad to hear you're doing well.
Yes, very different world.
Yeah, for sure. Okay, so somebody has to tell me before we move on, what would you consider a surprise feature in this regard? I just got to know.
I was trying to think. So I think what it might be driving at is there's this kind of assumption sometimes that maybe if you build something that's really important to your competitive advantage, you don't want people to know about it because your competitors will maybe copy it, and it will kind of like eliminate that advantage, or they might beat you to the market. I think at least that's how I take it, maybe, but I think, that's kind of a lot of times overblown, especially in this space. As soon as you launch it, it will be probably copied anyways. And you kind of lose out on all that feedback you might get throughout the building process that might tell you it's actually not as good of an idea as you thought. So yeah, I don't know. I guess that's how I took it. I'm interested if there are surprise features that the other panelists have like intentionally done. And maybe the other one would be for like a bad actor kind of thing. If you're too transparent, I don't know. Maybe there's a security risk, but yeah, generally I think everyone on here has done mostly open development.
Yeah, I think it's something we, at Offchain Labs, we often sort of think about and talk about of there's yeah, obviously everyone here, uh, we're building open source software, so we're doing things in public, but there is this question of, if we're working on some new bit of tech, like at what point in the discussion is the right time to be completely public with it? Is sort of an interesting question. One factor, as you said, is yes, there's some, there's like the question of like racing to get this thing out, and maybe some competitors find it first, that gives them some advantage, which, as I sort of agree, I tend to think that's, we're talking about like weeks or months where it's not necessarily that big of a deal. I think for us, speaking about Offchain Labs, one thing that we try to do is like if we're putting an idea out there, it used to be just like something that we're going to start talking about. Now it would be an idea that maybe the DAO is to sort of like look at and analyze and discuss. We definitely lean on the side of like, we want to make sure it's fully formed and that it's worked and that it works. And at Offchain Labs, a lot of us there have academic backgrounds, so there's, I think, this push to like really formalize things. Really, just because I think having the discussion in public in kind of a sloppy way sometimes happens in crypto, and then it can sort of just like waste time. We've sort of seen this before where there's proposals that are sort of half-baked and aren't fully thought out, but the community gets excited, and then by the time people think it through, they realize that there's big problems with it. Yeah, I don't want to like name names, so I'll just leave it at that. But I guess that's one thing that we do try to push against, is say like, okay, here's this, we're going to be talking more about, for example, this kind of version 2 of our challenge protocol, which I won't go into details now, but that's a good example of something where we've talked about it and we've given some information, but we want to make sure that once, if we're going to unveil this thing, if we're going to propose it, it's really thought through, and that we've made sure that yes, this is viable if we're going to even like ask the community to spend time thinking about it. So I don't know. That's just another factor that goes into how we communicate things in web. Yeah.
Perfect. All right, so we're going to post up our first poll. So if you guys are interested, we'd like to hear your thoughts. Do you think that DAOs should be more focused on building public, or do you think there's a legitimate reason to have things behind the curtains? We'll throw that up there on the board, and if everybody wants to give their thoughts and maybe make some comments, go ahead. So let's move on. We're going to talk about decision making within a DAO, which I'm sure we all know is where things start to get a little bit sticky, particularly when it comes to things like compensation and other, money-related issues. So let's talk about, how do you establish priorities as part of the decision-making process in the DAO? I mean, with you're coordinating a lot of multiple groups of builders. There's so many cooks in the kitchen, so many, opinions about how things move. How do you find that prioritization? Is there fracturing, or do you have team break-offs, or how does that work?
Like, I can share some about that, because like I think DAO doesn't mean like you have no dev team, right? Because like truly contributing, like we have team to write code and to design a protocol to do like smart contract code. So actually, I think like for priority is for BendDAO is more like be decided by the like team. Team's going to like collect all the feedback from the community and like decide which one go to first. And like we can hear more about from the community, but like for BendDAO, community is more like doing the downside for the whole protocol. We are not going to list bad assets to make the protocol have bad debit, and like make sure like the whole protocol or the team not going to make something stupid to make like whole protocol die. So but the upside for like efficiency, I think it depends on the dev team. So actually for us, I think dev team is going to make the decision, and those a group of smart people going to make the whole decision to the direction, but the DAO are going to like vote for like the downside. I'm not going to do something stupid to kill yourself. So that's my opinion.
Yeah, I mean, so I have more context from the lab's perspective, so I'm actually pretty interested. But yeah, so the way we look at prioritization is we say often the prioritization part is easy and the deprioritization part is really the hard part. So actually actively saying you're not going to do something. But I'm interested actually from like a DAO perspective, generally prioritization is just a function of like capacity and other things, but capacity being one big one. So I guess, how do you manage capacity, I guess, best with proposals? And are you doing it basically where you're anticipating how much work will be needed and how much you'll need to fund that, and you kind of set timelines? Or how have you all seen that work at Offchain Labs or BendDAO?
Yeah, I mean, I may be as someone at Offchain Labs, it's a very specific type of perspective because, like, the DAO is its own thing, which is distributed and is a series of is this collection of delegates who have the ability to pass proposals, including, by the way, someone at Connext has a fair amount of votes as of recently, by the way, which I was excited to see. So there's the DAO itself, and then there's the Arbitrum Foundation, which kind of helps is governed by the DAO, but kind of helps move things forwards. In terms of where our role at Offchain Labs fits in there, I mean, to be honest, it's all new enough that we're still sort of navigating this and figuring out, what's the way that we can be most useful to this ecosystem. But I think it's really the way to think about it is we're providing the services that we can, which is, we know this tech, we have our expertise, we have a great team of engineers, but we certainly have, we have things that we're working on that we would like to see adopted by Arbitrum 1 and Arbitrum Nova, the DAO governed chains. But we can build those things and we can sort of make our case, but we don't really, we don't want to be the decision makers, and quite literally we are not the decision makers. So I think there's going to be a handful of things coming up that we're going to be we're going to put out there. We're going to be pushing hard, like the challenge protocol I mentioned, Stylus, this sort of new version of the Arbitrum stack that allows more smart contract languages in a sentence. We'll put those things out there. There's the foundation has their plans on how they're going to be doing grants, and then as we're starting to see the DAO itself, we're starting to see that they have their own values, their own things that they're interested in. And I think like more and more, what we're already seeing, what we're going to see more of is Offchain Labs kind of lives downstream of the DAO, where it's like, okay, there's a proposal that needs to get passed. There's an upgrade that needs to be done. We can sort of help implement it. We can give our advice. We can give our warnings if we think it's a bad idea. But really, we're just there to sort of like facilitate things and do the engineering work so that the ecosystem can move in the direction that it wants to. So yeah, it's as you said, even last time we spoke, things are very different, and it takes a bit of getting used to. But I guess this is a long way of saying that at Offchain Labs, you don't really have that role of organizing the DAO or making these decisions. It's more like we reflect on, we're kind of a reflection of what the DAO wants, and we help see it through. But all that said, this is also early that I don't really. I don't really know what I'm talking about. I'm more speculating. As like this is how things should play out and seem to be playing out.
I think we're all there.
Yeah.
It's really
it's all uncharted territory, right? Yeah.
Right.
Good.
No, it's all good. I mean, it is a beautiful kind of function for a product manager. Like, I don't know, when you work on Web 2 products, a lot of it is sourcing user feedback, trying to like really weigh heavily on that for prioritization. Whereas this is just the users are actually the community, which is deciding the priorities. So you kind of have that organically, which is really nice. But yeah, we're all kind of figuring it out.
All right. So pushing forward, kind of talking about that, Daniel touched on the fact that, the way that the DAO is structured or the way that Offchain Labs works with the Arbitrum DAO, there's not a lot of direct work being put in from the labs group on behalf of the DAO. And in fact, it's more the tail wagging the dog in that case, if you want to look at it like that. How are these DAO governance mechanisms applicable to the product decisions themselves?
I have to think about that. Does anyone else want to take a stab?
Hitting them hard tonight. No worries. We can always move forward. We can come back to it. That's perfectly fine with me. So let's talk about product development under the structure of a DAO. So obviously, product decisions can be tricky. Like that was kind of what I was getting at with DAO governance and how those mechanisms worked when you're making all the various stages of product decisions. But the development process itself is a whole other kettle of fish. So how do you guys coordinate development cycles within a DAO? What role does the user feedback and the data that you take from them, how does that play into how you refine the product?
I mean, I could take this just more broadly with Web3. So for development cycles, it's really interesting where you're talking about different parts of the stack. So if you're talking about the application level, you can iterate quite frequently and much more easily. But if you're talking about the core protocol, you either never or rarely want to upgrade it. So we actually talk a lot about how it's kind of like launching a ship into NASA. It's not like traditional software development. It's you have like one chance to get it right. You have to get it audited, and it can be very expensive and time consuming. So there's just a lot more upfront planning and thought that goes into any kind of contract level change. And I'm assuming that extends to kind of if you're doing broad features around that. Ideally, you don't ever have to upgrade it, and the protocol is great, and it just from there is all at the application level. But yeah, we definitely, you can't just view product development as iterative as you'd like, just given the security risks.
Yeah.
I think Daniel or Pirate can speak more to the actual DAO part.
Yeah, no, I mean,
But yeah.
that's yeah, I mean, that's 100% true. And I think, yeah, with the layer two, it's in this weird niche where it is, the core product is this kind of, exists at the protocol level, not the application level. And it is, like I said before, so you could sort of think of it as infrastructure. So these sort of like user facing needs, users of Arbitrum are really usually, typically we're talking about users of specific dApps, and, those people building on Arbitrum are sort of in charge of like that user experience. So at Offchain Labs, we can sort of like take our hands off and say, okay, that's up to the dApps to figure out what to do. Probably like the thing that that Offchain Labs hosts that's most like a typical application or a product in that way is probably the Arbitrum bridge. So that's a web dApp that we maintain, and we take feedback, we look at support tickets, all of the usual things there. I think for more generally like evolving the product, like you just said, the it's not as though I mean even in the past it wasn't as though we could just sort of like regularly ship core protocol changes, because those are a big deal. It's high stakes, and certainly now with the DAO, any protocol change has to go through the DAO, which means it's going to be a lot slower. It's sort of an even bigger deal to propose it. Where we can sort of like iterate on things faster, it's less about user feedback than developer feedback. So figuring out what developers want, what developers run into, where they're confused, and figuring out ways we can offer bits of tooling or work with other infrastructure providers to make developers' life easier is a big part of what we do. Whether that's like our client-side library, which we're always adding to, and this stuff very much. It's become clear to me like to have an ecosystem like this very much takes a village. So working with indexing services, block explorers, and now with the DAO, it's like we're looking a lot with, for example, with Tally, the Tally UI, and sort of what features would make life easier for developers working with related things and users there. So yeah, I guess like that's in terms of how the product evolves, it's sort of day to day or week to week. It's more things like that. And then if there is a protocol change, that's more big, long term. We're talking like a few times a year, big feature that we spend a lot of time in. And like I said, we try to like have a full, complete picture of what that will be before, so that when we propose it, when we go public with it, it's clear what it is we're building. So yeah, it's a little all over the place, and it's one of those things. Like I said, there's no real playbook here, so we're kind of figuring out the best way to go about this. But yeah, I think developer feedback is really one of the more important things at the level that we operate.
Yeah, like for BendDAO, every people can go to the Discord to give some feedback for the product. Like BendDAO is more like building product instead of like protocol or layer 2, or more like fundamental like infrastructure for like Offchain Lab or Connext. So actually our product is more like for end users. So like not many developers build on us. So actually like every people can go to our Discord, like make an idea, say, hey, I want this feature, blah blah blah, and like after the idea be passed, we will have a forum to discuss that, and like people can vote, like use our Ben token to vote and say, yeah, we want this feature, but the priority is decided by the core team. Like core team will collect more feedback from the Discord and the community, but generally like our product is more like built by like dev team. So actually we hear more about the feedback, and like everybody can proposal to make some new features, but generally like the whole like software engineering, like doing smart contract and auditing and those things are all done by the dev team. So actually like this is how BendDAO works.
Okay, so that all touches a lot on the development process working under a DAO. So I guess this gives me an opportunity to kind of swing it back around to what I asked before, which was, how do those governance mechanisms, how do they affect the product decisions? So beyond dev, so marketing process, release schedules, how they fit into the greater idea of the product or other products, the family of products, if you will. Still a stumper, I guess. All right. Well, let's talk about.
Yeah. I mean,
which part?
Yeah.
You go ahead.
Sure. I mean, I would just say what I kind of suspect will happen is that like I said, maybe because I'm focused on the tech side and it's more lower level. There is this weird thing where a lot of the things that we have in mind, changes we want to make, improvements that we see, are from the perspective of, say, the average delegate in the DAO, a bit niche. A new design for what we call retriable tickets, L1 to L2 messages, and a way of having them be a little more clear so that refunds are more easily accessible and so they don't expire so quickly. So I can feel people's eyes glazing over and or ears. And so, it's we want to propose these change and we want the community involved, but there's only a narrow sliver of the community that really would have interest and really would be able to contribute to this discussion. What I think will happen over time is basically what, at least what I hope to see, I can put it that way, is that a lot of this core protocol stuff will sort of solidify. And then what we'll see is that most of these relevant decisions and how the product evolves will be more things that are not at the protocol level so much. Again, things like grant distributions, things like, real world engagement events, hackathons, how we engage different communities. And what I sort of suspect is that other than, again, these big core protocol changes that we'll keep working on at Offchain Labs, a lot of the work that we'll do is going back to just you have the Arbitrum Foundation handling a lot of those things I just mentioned, and Offchain Labs' job is making these things accessible, making it clear, communicating, making sure that any feature has nice tooling available, good tutorials, things like that. So that's how I suspect things will evolve. I think that's sort of the best case scenario, is the wonkier stuff solidifies, and it's more the job of Offchain Labs to make everyone's life nicer, make things easy, make things transparent. And then the quote unquote product decisions are less of the wonky stuff and more, fun real world initiatives. But once again, we will see because it's sort of hard to know the direction that the community will take things. So I think that's the best answer I can give.
I think like
Awesome, man. Great answer too. Oh, go ahead.
yeah, I think like most people from community, like if he's not a developer, like I don't think he can design the whole product for the like something like a BendDAO, because like crypto is more like a tech drive, so like we have a lot of like limitation about the gas, about how to design the protocol to make like it's more efficient for the people. So I think like community can have idea, but generally like how to implement that idea, maybe even can't implement it by right now, like this cost too much. So actually like I think dev going to like for response, like how to implement a protocol, a future or not. So right now like BendDAO have many ideas from the community, but like devs going to reply like, hey, like this idea is good, but maybe like we can't implement it right now because like we have something like more important, and like this future, if we done it by smart contract code, it would be gas cost high or something like that, or maybe it even can't implement on chain. Like, and so actually as for right now, BendDAO like user going to like have idea and they're going to contribute more about the ideas, but generally at the end like the dev team is going to decide like how to implement the futures.
Yeah, and I mean, maybe I suspect that a lot of DAO, maybe this is something that DAOs have in common. At least DAOs that have, what I would consider true, like on-chain governance, executable governance, is what you're describing right there, where it's not so much that you need this entire distributed community to weigh into all these decisions, because obviously, there's only so many community members that can. What I think the DAO's responsibility is making sure that they're sort of like delegating these decisions to parties that are trustworthy, and making sure that these things are distributed, that the folks who are really like pushing these decisions are not captured in any way, that they've proven themselves trustworthy. It's it's a bit more like the democracy model, where it's not that the average citizen has to be an expert on policy, but you want citizens to sort of make judgment on are we really trusting the right people and delegating the right people. So yeah, that's probably the general trend that we'll see across the board. Yeah.
All right. So one of the last things I want to ask you guys, and one of the things that will be the topic of our final poll, is in a DAO structure, you're dealing less, I guess, with a unified vision of the group, because the DAO is, put forward by those who contribute to the DAO. And when you're dealing with smart contracts, we have immutability versus upgradability. And it feels like if there's decisions that aren't made up front on an immutable contract, there can be some, fairly dire consequences if those things are pushed through by a DAO. On the other hand, of course, upgradability has its own sacrifices. So which is more preferable in a DAO environment from a developer standpoint?
I think it's all depends like what are you going to build. If you're going to build the fundamental Lego for the whole like ecosystem, I think make it upgradable is good, because like you're not going to ask people to trust you. Like in MT5, like we have delegate cash, which is a not upgradable contract. Like if you delegate your hot wallet to your cold wallet, not going to lose for your MTs, which is high value. And think like delegate cash doing way like it's not upgradable. Like many people can build application up on them. I think it's a very good way. But if you're going to build like to the user end like protocol, I think it should be like upgradable, because like you're going to change from market, the market condition change from time to time. You need to like going to upgrade your contract to fit the market. So actually, I think it's all depends on what are you going to build.
Yeah, I think it's quite different. It's quite difficult. It's a good question because, at least with software products, especially, even if it's a protocol, you are building what you think is the best based on the information you have. But a lot of times the strategy we're taking is, very broad. So we're creating something that's like a Lego that could be used in a variety of different ways. But of course, over time, we'll figure out the best ways that that works. And we may want to lean into that or iterate on it. And of course, we'll probably learn more. And there may be, outside market changes that change as well. So I think it's quite hard for me to, picture a fully non-upgradable. But of course, the security risks are, it depends, like Pyro was saying, on exactly what you're building. And then, of course, you have to be super cautious about security risks. So there's definitely that huge push and pull. But for me, I do think just the general strategy that a lot of us are taking, which is kind of, headless, like we are starting with a idea and a kernel, and we're going to learn a lot over the next few years. I think it matters a lot to be able to iterate based on what you learn, as long as you do so in a secure way.
Yeah, this is a really like good question, and probably like in a way an under discussed question. I think I hope to see more talk about it, especially in the context of things like layer twos. Yeah, basically, I mean, what Alex just said, those are two of the most important considerations. One of the reasons, with something like Arbitrum, I don't think, certainly not anytime soon, you'd want to see something like the whole protocol, the whole protocol running on immutable contracts for the reasons that he said. One is just security risks, right? There's always a non-zero probability that there's some sort of vulnerability, and we want to sort of have the system be safe and handle users' funds responsibly. If it's sort of sufficiently complex, and I think with layer twos, they're fairly complex. And then the other thing is just the ability to iterate, where, yeah, I mean, I don't want to repeat everything Alex just said, but I totally agree. We're sort of building things using what we know and using the tools we have, but those things change over time. Arbitrum has already, as of, I guess last September, basically rebuilt the stack and launched our version 2, which was Nitro. Like I mentioned, there's a sort of like another upgrade that we want to put out there called Stylus. So we want to be able to iterate. We want to be able to add features, and then yes, there's the security risk. The other factor that I think really varies depending on what the product is the ease of migration. So you look at something like Uniswap, which is an example of something that does have immutable contracts. It's fairly simple, so there's at least lower security risk. In terms of iterating, that's something where it's relatively easy to migrate. If you look at going back some years now, the sort of like transition from Uniswap v2 to v3, Uniswap v2 still exists, and in that case, it's a relatively low lift to ask users who are interested to migrate to v3 of Uniswap, and that's sort of because let's just say average users, those who are using Uniswap to trade, don't actually keep their funds there, right? They just trade and then they're done, so they don't have to do anything. Liquidity providers have to migrate, but again, that's fairly low risk and simple. With something like a layer 2, it's just much more complex. We can just sort of leave it at that to even think about what a migration would look like from one immutable system to a new one. So I think for the foreseeable future, what you're going to see is that layer 2s will have some path towards upgrading their contracts. But I think what's really important is to say that's not the end of the story. Once you accept that you have upgradability, there's a very broad design space in terms of how you handle it. And this is the part where I would love to see more discussion happen. And we'll probably start putting out some proposals, meaning just like on forums and stuff of next steps. Not to go on too long, I feel like I'm rambling a bit, but if you look at the current governance of the Arbitrum system, it's sort of like you can upgrade it, the DAO can upgrade it arbitrarily in this permissionless and decentralized way. That's sort of one path. And then there's this other path, which is like the Security Council, which is basically just there for, knock on wood, but if there is some vulnerability discovered, they can sort of quickly patch it. So the Security Council is, it's a multi-sig, it's a distributed set of entities of independent parties that can sort of upgrade it instantly, right? Now, there's a very, very broad design space between that and immutability. And I think thinking about systems where, there is some way to recover from vulnerabilities, but the Security Council or, whoever it is who has this affordance to do these emergency upgrades has more restrictions. where you ensure that you can sort of patch things, but for example, in the absolute worst case scenario that a security council goes malicious, you delay the right things, let's say, or you add certain delays so that users can either veto upgrades or withdraw their funds in the appropriate circumstances. You can see I'm being a little bit vague because I don't want to like spell out some of the possible ideas here, but I think this is like maybe, at least in my view, when it comes to things like layer twos, this is maybe the next most important thing that is under discussed, is how do we, while maintaining a path of upgradability, maintain this property that okay, this thing is still safe, we're not putting funds at risk, while still getting sort of the level of decentralization we want. And I think that will be the state of layer twos for a while. So yeah, this is at the top of my mind, the things I'm interested in seeing improve. Yeah.
I think generally, if you're going to build a non-upgradable contract, I think you're lucky. Like you means like you are doing something like very fundamental of the Lego system. Like I think if I'm going to build something like that, I'm going to happy for that, because like the more fundamental of your Lego, the more like people ecosystem build on you. Like you have better chance to make it in the end, like success in the end, because like more people building on you, like you're not going to build success more easily. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think with layer twos, because they are fundamental, right? They're fundamental to Ethereum's future, while at the same time they're very complex. There is this other path, which is the contracts themselves they're not upgradable at the contract level, at the application level, let's say, but there is sort of a broad consensus that they become what are called like enshrined rollups, which is to say that the Ethereum community, generally speaking, sort of almost treats them as part of the core protocol. And when it comes to decisions on whether to alter Ethereum itself or hard fork Ethereum, layer twos are sort of like looped into the core protocol code itself as to sort of like what would qualify. Now that's a more radical thing, and that's just the kind of thing that if it ends up going that way, that's for the Ethereum community to decide. I don't think even the Arbitrum community should really be pushing things one way or another, and certainly Offchain Labs won't. So that's another possible end state, is that L2 has become enshrined, and then in some sense we could think of them as immutable at the application level. But yeah, that's more big picture, and our feeling is, in the meantime, we need to launch something. Clearly Ethereum needs to scale. So yeah, that goes back to the sort of design space I was talking about earlier. But yeah.
All right, awesome. Well, we are coming up to the end here and top of the hour. So I'm going to start to wrap things up. So we're going to have one more poll. We're going to throw it up there. Should all smart contracts that are published by DAOs be immutable? Yes or no? Give your thoughts. We'd love to hear them. So I'm going to give a couple minutes to each of you all to talk a little bit about your projects, what you have coming up, what's coming up next. Normally my notes say for quarter two, but quarter two is almost over. So what you got coming up in the summer is your chance to chill. And we'll start with Pirate.
Like in BendDAO, we are going to launch our staking with two, like in most of MT holders, like they have some like staking like apes and mutants, like yoga system. They can have the staking and enjoy the like ApeCoin rewards for the MTs. So actually, some people buy the MTs, like they didn't buy the ApeCoin, which they need ApeCoin and MT together to go into yield. But we make the pairing and auto compounding for the users. So actually, we are going to launch our staking with two. And I think it's launched already, and like we are going to support like staking with tools people to borrow ETH from the BendDAO, and the process is in governance, like people vote yes, and yeah, that's our next milestone for like our protocol.
Perfect. Daniel.
Sure. So in terms of some of the stuff that we're working on that you should see more about in the near future, so I mentioned like the Security Council and various ways, this kind of emergency recourse, various ways of decentralizing that and giving the DAO more control over that. So we're working on implementing what will be the first round of like Security Council elections, which the DAO will hold, to elect or re-elect members, which we'll be putting more of that out there, but the first election should happen in September. In terms of other stuff that we're working on within Offchain Labs, like I said, this new version of the challenge protocol, which is slightly on the wonky side, but the sort of punchline is this will get us towards permissionless validation, which gets us a step closer to decentralization. And another feature, like I said, that's really exciting is, which I also mentioned, is Stylus, which is sort of a next phase of the of the Arbitrum virtual machine. So it'll still be EVM compatible, but it'll also be able to support smart contracts written in other languages like Rust and C++. So that's something we'll be putting out there for the DAO to discuss and debate. And I'll also just say that, in terms of what the Arbitrum Foundation is doing, which I'm not a member of, but I know that soon, once we get this first kind of round of proposals in and finalized, there'll be more information about stuff like ecosystem grants, which is something we haven't really seen in Arbitrum yet. So that should be exciting. So look out for that.
All right, and finally, Alex.
Yeah, so a lot of exciting things. We just did our protocol upgrade this spring, so we've been really kind of in the initial growth phase of that. The thing we're probably most excited about right now is chain abstraction. So we just launched a toolkit about 2 weeks ago. I'll kind of tie it to the product market fit discussion. So basically, when we look at product market fit, or you could call it protocol market fit or market fit in general. Anyways, we look at it from a Web3 overall perspective, not just Connext. So instead of trying to just take market share of existing users, we realize, we're still in a very early part of the adoption curve. And so in order to actually scale applications to be used by the broader public, we think we need to vastly simplify the UX. And so basically this means we've launched a toolkit that allows developers to build cross-chain, natively cross-chain applications, where you start to abstract having to think about consciously what chain you're on and switch your money between chains. So we just launched that toolkit. We are rolling that out with some initial projects right now, and that's probably the number one thing we're most excited about. We also have a couple other things we're focused on right now. One is cross-chain governance. So this would tie to kind of DAOs, both executing proposals and allowing voting across chains. Again, just simplifying, as we enter more and more roll-up world, the ability to kind of interoperate as a DAO overall, where people and votes are potentially spread out. The last one we're super excited about is cross-chain tokens. So just the ability to, natively have your token cross-chain without, just to vastly improve capital efficiency and reduce the need to, constantly swap into and out of representation tokens. So these are a few of the things we're focused on. And yeah, if you're interested in any of them, just feel free to reach out.
All right. Awesome. Well, thank you to all our wonderful guests for contributing their time to this extremely educational series that we've been putting on. Thank you to our listeners for coming out so late or so early. I know this is a bit of an odd time for Spaces. Please follow all of our wonderful speakers here on Twitter if you haven't already. These are some of the best minds in the space today, and you're bound to learn something. Connect with Connext on Discord at discord.gg/Connext. Become part of our community. We'd love to have you. And of course, keep your eyes on our Twitter to find out when our next Spaces is coming up. Thanks again, and everybody have a wonderful night.